Thanks everybody for joining us. So in today's webinar, myself and Mark will take you through a little bit of a journey around our solution update for MTD for ITSA. Just a few housekeeping for the webinar before we kick off. So this session will run for approximately 60 minutes. We'll be taking questions at the end. We'll have a Q&A panel, so you get an opportunity to ask myself and Mark questions directly. We've got a chat that's available within Zoom, so you can not only communicate with us, but you can also communicate amongst yourselves. And this session will be recorded, so afterwards you will be able to get an on-demand version of this to watch at the leisure of your time. Just some quick introductions. I'm Dorcas Whitty. I'm one of the senior product managers here at Wolters Kluwer, and what that essentially means is I own the product development for MTD for ITSA and our personal tax self-assessment offerings as well. So I'm fairly new to the business, been at Wolters Kluwer for almost 7 months, but been in tax technology for over 5 years.
Yes, good afternoon everyone. My name is Mark Purdue. I look after all of the compliance products. So Dorcas looks after tax, and equally accounts and audit, they all come under my remit. I've worked in the technology sector for tax and accounting for 16 years, sadly now. So yes, I've got a bit of experience, but similar to Dorcas, I've not been with Wolters Kluwer for that long. I've been here about 5 months. So to start with, what I'm going to do is just run through a bit of an introduction on what we're going to do. So we've done our introductions, and then I'm going to now sort of give you a bit of an overview of the cloud approach. Then Dorcas is going to give you a demo and talk a bit about MTD process, and then we'll finish with questions at the end. So if we go on to cloud approach. So when we talk about cloud products and what we're doing and why we're changing things so that we're moving to the cloud, I think there's a few things that we're sort of mindful of. One is best of breed. At the moment, with our on-premise, our desktop suite of products, we've got a great integrated suite of products, and we need to be mindful that that same capability, where relevant, still needs to be in the cloud as and when we build out a suite of products in the cloud. So it's making sure that that exceptional user experience and that rich functionality is still present in the cloud. And the next bit, I won't delve into too many technicalities here, but when we talk about APIs, the best way to think about them is they're the glue that sticks different software products together. So when we're approaching the cloud, the opportunities for us to integrate with third parties, to get data from third parties is much enhanced over desktop. So really our approach to the cloud is we're always thinking of how we can use APIs and how we can share data or receive data more efficiently. And being part of the global organization that is Wolters Kluwer, we're not, when we talk about cloud and we talk about having ultimately a suite of products in the cloud, we don't necessarily have to start with a blank piece of paper for each product. Obviously, being global, there are certain bits and pieces of products around the globe that we can use in the UK. So where it's relevant and where it's appropriate for the UK market, we've got that sort of that head start when it comes to having cloud product. And this for me is the most important one about any sort of approach to moving from an on-premise desktop suite to the cloud, is if you lose sight of what we're trying to do and the reasons behind why we're doing it, then it's all a bit fruitless. The cloud gives us that opportunity to make sure you are being more productive, our software is being more accurate where appropriate, and where we can automate and make things efficient, then certainly that's what has got to be driving us. And towards the end of this presentation, Dorcas is going to talk to you briefly about the beta. Two parts of the beta. One is that MTD pilot submission with HMRC, but also the product we've got available today is sort of running beta tests with our users to put that product in front of users, and they can feed back at this early stage and to make sure it does what they need it to do. So that's all part of that beta program. And then finally, today we've got sort of this world-class product and world-class experience within Wolters Kluwer, and we've got to be mindful that in the cloud, we still want that fully integrated suite. We don't want to be repeating data entry. We don't want to have multiple client lists. So it's that same approach of one data entry, one client list, and sharing that data both internally and where appropriate via APIs, via some third parties as well. That really is sort of what is driving our approach to cloud generally when we talk about cloud software. So what I'm now going to do, that's it from me for the moment. I'm now going to hand over to Dorcas, who's going to talk a bit more about MTD and the process behind it. And then she's going to be demoing what we've got today, and then we'll wrap up at the end.
Thanks, Mark. So when we look at what a typical self-assessment process looks like, this is the diagram that kind of paints a picture of the current state of the self-assessment preparation and submission stage. There's multiple layers of getting data from clients, chasing clients for that data if it's not received in a timely manner. It's then if the data that you're getting isn't in a digital format, it's about how you as a tax accountant goes about augmenting that data, formatting that data to get it in a structure that meets your needs. So there's a level of data manipulation that goes into it, as well as data capture if you're capturing the data for the client if they don't use bookkeeping solutions. So that age-old scenario where you've been given a box full of receipts. There's a second layer once you've augmented that data. It's then around getting clarification, reviewing, making your checks and making your adjustments, as well as making your queries to the client, just to confirm that what you have is accurate and it's ready to be submitted to HMRC as a final self-assessment return. So that whole process, depending on your clients and depending on your firm, can be quite cumbersome. You've got a whole entire year to get this process done before you need to make your submissions at the end of January. So in terms of the current state of the self-assessment process, a year to get all of this done seems like an efficient process, but we know that usually there's a bit of a bottleneck. You won't get your data that you need in the first half of that compliance cycle. HMRC data has stated that over 47% of tax returns are outstanding by the 1st of January. That's almost close to 500,000 returns that need to be submitted between the 1st of January and the end to meet that compliance deadline. That's a lot of work for tax accountants to do at the very last minute. If we now overlay this process with MTD, you now have a finite amount of time to start your process of data collection for your quarterly updates. That means getting that information. If it's not by digital means, it's collating that, augmenting that into a digital format for you to then submit to HMRC. And this needs to be done on a quarterly basis. So that window that you used to have of a year to be able to prepare your client's data is now only just 3 months. And this needs to be repeated throughout the year until you get to your end of period statement process, which is another obligation that you would need to submit. And even once that's done, you've also got your final declaration to also prepare and submit on your client's behalf. And this final declaration is essentially replacing that self-assessment that you need to do. Essentially, what this picture paints is a bit of a dull time when it comes to putting together all of the required data that you need to make the submissions under this new MTD world. This means efficiency is key. So when we talk about MTD and we talk about the process, we've got the 3 obligations that you need to submit, whereas in the previous world, it was only 1 obligation, which was your self-assessment form. So what can you do to help prepare your firm to get MTD compliant? Well, the first step is assessing your client base. So this is getting an understanding of who your clients are and who is going to be impacted. So segmenting them based on also the impact and the extent to which not only your practice but also your clients are already compliant with MTD. So for example, how are they currently set up? Do they keep digital records like bookkeeping solutions? How do they currently do their self-assessment today? Will give you a key indication of the level of resources and aid that you would need to provide to transition them over to MTD. Step 2 is deciding on your approach. Decide on a level of change that is required. This means reviewing your digital transformation strategy or approach, reevaluating your existing compliance software or stack of compliance software that you may have in-house, and assessing if they will be MTD compliant and meet the needs of your practice. Step 3 is around building the growth of your practice. So this is understanding the relationships you currently have with your customer base. So you might have some clients who you previously engaged with on an annual basis, which you will now need to engage with more frequently. So you need to start thinking about how you're able to support this. Does that mean you'd need additional staff and resources to cope? Do you need to reevaluate the fee structure and the services that you offer your clients? Step 4 is around reviewing your options and start implementation for new software if it's required. So this is around engaging with your software provider, having candid conversations with your account managers to see whether or not the software you currently have can meet your firm's operational and compliance needs when MTD is mandated. So what can you do now? One of the things we're encouraging at Waters Clue is to start having those conversations fairly early on and fairly regularly. This means having conversations with your clients and educating them on the change once you've done that segmentation work and understand who needs the most help. And it also means getting your firm on board to new technologies and training staff on new MTD compliant software if it's required. So before I jump into the demo, I'll just quickly give you an overview of what Waters Clue is doing in this space and what our end-to-end solution looks like. So we're keen to help our existing customers and also prospects to be compliant when MTD for ITSA is mandated, and ensuring our product meets the needs of practices to efficiently serve the needs of their clients impacted by the requirement. So in today's world, our customers are able to submit quarterly updates to HMRC, submit the end of period statements for UK property businesses and also self-employment. We're also able to file amended returns, make any manual adjustments, as well as having the capabilities to view the compliance obligations, deadlines, and also the estimated calculations. What we're looking to build out in the future is our capabilities to prepare and submit the final declaration. And that includes incorporating the additional data sources such as the UK interest and UK bank feeds, gift aids, and so on. So before I jump into the demo, what I'm going to be showcasing is going to be how we do the quarterly submissions and how we submit this to HMRC. So this is our MTD platform or application. We're in the client workspace at the moment. So we've got our client listed up here. This is just a dummy client that we're working with within HMRC sandbox environment. So this will give us the capabilities to make submissions. We'll go into MTD, and because the MTD obligation requires us to have the client national insurance number, and this is the unique identifier that links HMRC and our software to be able to pull the latest and greatest data that HMRC holds and the obligations that's required for this client. You can see here we've got our sections for quarterly submissions. We've also got a section for our end of period statements, and then once we develop out our final declaration, that will be included here as well. These are the data sources that are picked up from HMRC using that client national insurance number. So here we can see for UK properties, we've got all of our 4 obligations, and these have all been submitted to HMRC. For our self-assessment business, we've got 3 obligations submitted so far, and we need to submit the final piece for our Q4 data. In order to make submissions and upload data, we'll be able to do this by clicking the View button. The data input fields on this screen aren't editable, so you can't input data, and this is because of the MTD requirement for digital links and to maintain that digital journey. At the moment, the capabilities we've implemented to allow us to upload data into the system is via tagged Excel spreadsheets, but we will be able to support capabilities to directly link with bookkeeping solutions as well as bank feeds. So I'll quickly just upload data for this client, and we can see that's flowed through. I'm happy with that, so I'll finalize this information and then I'll click my submit to HMRC. That submission's now successfully been made. I can go back into my data entry screen, and now I can see that for my self-employment business, my fourth quarter has now been finalized and also submitted to HMRC. This is also indicated within the submission log, where I've got my self-employment business here, and then I'm given an audit trail of when it was submitted, who it was submitted by, the status, as well as the estimated liability that we received back from HMRC. At the moment, this current submission is just pending. Now that we've submitted our final quarter, we can now move on to the end of period statements. So this is quite a similar view to our quarterly submission. We've got the obligations, and we can now start the process, because under the requirement, you can't start the end of period process until all 4 of your quarterly submissions have been submitted. You also get on this screen your due dates for that submission, so you're always aware of what's potential deadlines are looming and what will be outstanding if you haven't made that submission. In our end of period statement, we have a view of our income expenses, our disallowable expenses, our allowances and adjustments, as well as our final summary screen. And I'll just quickly take you through the flow. So this is where you can make some adjustments to your quarterly submission. So the data that we see here is an amalgamation of all of our quarterly submissions in one space for that business. So at the moment, this is on a per business basis. We've got our yearly totals and our HMRC quarterly totals as well. So I won't be making any adjustments in this end of period statement, so I'll just whiz through this. And when we get to the end, we're provided with a summary report that we can choose to download and send off to our client for approval before we make the submission. We are enhancing the solution so that it can handle in-product collaboration between a tax accountant and the client itself. So that will enable us to give in-product e-sign capabilities. If we're happy with that, I can hit the Submit to HMRC button. I'm given the declaration just to state that I am comfortable with submitting this on my client's behalf, which I am. And I'll make that submission. So now we can see here the status has changed. We no longer have our due dates and the countdown for that. We now have a completed status, and we aren't able to make any amendments to that until the final declaration stage. If I go back into my submission log, we can see this has now been updated. So for our self-assessment business, we had our Q4 submission status. Now we've got our submission status for the same company, but this time for our end of period statements. And the audit trail does not change in terms of the submitted by, the status, as well as the estimated liability that we get back from HMRC. This is a overview of kind of the happy path flow for an existing client that is within the system. So what I mean by existing clients is that we've gone through the grant authorization process, and it's been a seamless journey throughout. If we've got a brand new client who hasn't given the product authorization, we'll go through a different flow, which I'll show you now. So I've just switched clients. You can tell I've switched clients because the client name on the upper screen has changed, so I'm now in Sean Errors. This is me setting up my client. So I get to select the tax year, and then I get to select the return type. So for this client, it's MTD for income tax, and I'll be submitting the quarterly submissions and the end of period statements for that client. As I mentioned before, the national insurance number is a key requirement for us to be able to pull the relevant obligation as well as the data that HMRC holds. So this is a mandatory field for us to put in. During the client setup, I've already put this data in, so it automatically appears. Once I've set up the client for MTD, the next process is gaining authorization so that I can start to submit the quarterly submissions and the EOPS on their behalf. So this is essentially what I would need to do, is just copy the authorization link and the request ID and submit this to the client, and they'll be able to grant authorization on their behalf once they log into their HMRC accounts. And that is a whistle-stop tour of our MTD for income tax demo. So in terms of what's been submitted, we've managed to go through the process. We've managed to do our, oops, my keyboard was stuck. We've managed to submit our quarterly submissions, and then we moved on to the end of period statements. We managed to do some manual adjustments and review the estimated calculations that we get back from HMRC. We then completed the process by submitting our end of period statements to HMRC. So what's next? What we've been working on as we've been developing our MTD for ITSA solution is we've gone through a first phase of our beta program. So like Mark said, we're entering into our second phase of the beta. And essentially what we did during that was we gathered some feedback from a specific group of customers who got the opportunity to play about with the system, and that would essentially help us in shape and develop the product, as well as HMRC services. So what we're doing now is extending our beta so that anybody who is willing to join can do. And what that means, again, it's just further testing our solution to ensure that it's robust and it's able to meet the needs of a wider set of practices. We'll also be a part of HMRC's pilot program, so you can join us there, where we'll be submitting a live return with the assistance of HMRC. So if you're interested in joining either of those programs, you can either reach out to your account manager if you're an existing customer of ours, and they'll be able to walk you through what the onboarding process looks like, and then you can get started. Just to clarify, with the beta program, it is an unmoderated beta, so you'd be given the login credentials and an active account for a set period of time so that you can play about with the system, and it will be dummy data and a dummy account that you'll be given, so you won't need to upload any personal information into the system at all. And then we'll also give you a set period of time in order to complete it, because we are aware that it is tax season, so we wouldn't want to put restrictions in terms of when you'll be able to complete it. I think it's over to you, Mark.
Great, thank you, Dorcas. Yeah, so in terms of what happens next and where we are today. So at the moment, as Dorcas has shown you, we can do that quarterly, let's call it the quarterly journey for trading income and property income, focused on an Excel import. We will be building out, I touched on APIs at the beginning, we'll be building out APIs so we can get data from third parties as well. We can do those submissions. And I've mentioned their supporting workspace. So that's the area where Dorcas showed you where you log in, and there might not be much there yet, but you might have seen there was a section called messages, and that's where over time There'll be a lot more data there, and you'll be able to interact with your clients, etc., etc. An end of period statement. So that is all ready for us to beta test with our users today. So what we're actually focused on at the moment, and I see there's a question came in on this, so I'll pick up the question at the same time. So what we're actually working on at the moment is that final declaration piece. And for clarity, when we talk about final declaration, that is the equivalent of submitting your SA return. So if you imagine an SA return that's got your bank interest, your dividends, your foreign income, your gift aid, your pension contributions, MTD applies to all of that. The quarterly process only applies to trading income and property income, but the annual final declaration process applies to everything else. So to say that another way, for clarity, you won't have an SA client in MTD. You will either have an MTD client who goes end-to-end journey as MTD, or you will have an SA client. You won't have both. So to answer the specific question, can we demo final declaration today? Not yet, but shortly. And how does it link back to personal tax? So it does link back to Central in terms of sharing client data and allowing you to see progress. It's not there today, but you'll be able to see progress of your MTD submissions from within Central. And we are looking at what data we have in CCH personal tax, let's say from last year's SA return, that you want on this year's MTD, if we imagine we're sat in April 2024. But you won't have to share data between CCH personal tax and our MTD solution, because the client will exist in one place or the other. So when our immediate focus for that final declaration is trying to get the most benefit for us and for you for taking part in that beta, we've tried to pick on the most likely areas that a client might have when we come to do that first phase of MTD submissions. So we're focused at the moment on bank interest, dividends, gift aid, and pension contributions is another one to call out. So it feels to me, and correct me if our assumptions here are wrong, that is a typical simple sole trader / landlord is likely to have those areas there. Then in terms of later, and so in progress takes us to just beyond the end of this year in time for April 23, when the beta the MTD pilot kicks off with renewed vigor, let's call it that. So later is from beyond that, and that is really building out the scope of the SA return for MTD. So I mentioned foreign income, pensions, all that sort of thing has to be covered by MTD. So my caveat at this stage is HMRC have a roadmap for them to deliver against for MTD. And so obviously our roadmap is very much dependent on them delivering on their roadmap. So I can't put too much detail on that later column at the moment, other than to say it's going to be the scope of the SA 100 return in time for mandation. So that's it from me. I think that now takes us to the question slide. And then, oh yeah, sorry, apologies. So please scan that QR code. We've got an ebook to support a lot of the information we've given you here and a bit more background around MTD generally. So feel free to download that and have a look. What I now will do is go through some of the open questions. So Fozio has asked, if I'm already in the beta, can other members of my team also join to test in? Yes, of course. So Dorcas mentioned that we will be having sort of test credentials and dummy clients. So we're not restricting to, let's say, one user per firm. You know, if there's a firm that wants to take part and wants to bring on 3 or 4 employees as part of that, then by all means, no problem. Which accounting bookkeeping apps will be compatible with your product? So, I mean, obviously our focus will be on the main benefits of where we can share data. So we've started by looking at Excel, because that's a bit of a pain point for clients who today are paper-based. They may well progress to Excel, but might not progress much further. But obviously then let's call out some of the big names that we would be happy to integrate with would be Xero, QuickBooks, and people like that. Ultimately, with our API strategy, anyone, you know, subject to security, etc., anyone would be able to start that integration journey with us. I spoke of tagged Excel spreadsheets. Will you provide suggested templates for rental and employment, self-employment? Yeah, so what our template is we use the Excel naming, so that you can name a cell. So you might have start date, end date, turnover, things like that. So we give you a template. You don't have to use our template, provided you use a template with those names, then you'll be able to import, and you can link our template to, so you could have a simple cash book that you show to a client and have our template hidden, but the two are linked together. So when you come to import, you just unhide our sheet and import it. So part of what we're doing, particularly around the beta, is more than happy to share those templates. Can CCH be used for the finalization stage only with the EOPS being brought in from HMRC already submitted via some other? Yes, so I guess this is the same answer for quarterly to end of period statement and from end of period statement to the final declaration. If your client does the quarterly directly, then you can still pick up the end of period statement onwards. Equally, if your client was to do the quarterly and end of period statement, let's say in their bookkeeping product, then you would be able to pick up from the final declaration onwards. We haven't got the capability yet, but we will have, so don't worry about that. But that will be, obviously at the moment, we submit the quarterly data so we know what it is, but where we don't have the quarterly data, we'll do a call to HMRC, bring in that quarterly data, and then allow you to do the EOPS. Or equally, if you want to do, we can then bring in the EOPS if it's been done elsewhere to open up that final declaration capability. Will the current DTA pull still work in the cloud solution? So I'm guessing this question is the DTA capability in our on-premise software. Yes and no is my simple answer, and I know that sounds a bit vague. So what we've got today that we call the DTA isn't actually looking at MTD data at HMRC. So that's looking at various data points at HMRC. So the employment data, for example, comes from the employer's payroll record. State pension we pick up, national insurance we pick up. When a client goes to MTD, it's a completely different part of HMRC that we get the data from. So the short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is the data we will be getting in our cloud software will be a lot more comprehensive in terms of scope. So we will be able to get access to, for example, things like live employment data rather than just the historic stuff that turns up a few months after the end of the year. So it's different data, but yes, you will still get that interaction with HMRC.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, HMRC have also recently announced a new data service. I believe the acronym is RVR, if I'm not mistaken. So we're also going to be looking into how we might be able to feed into that. They haven't disclosed any information of how software providers like ourselves are able to connect to that new system, but it's something we'll be investigating as an additional data source, essentially.
Okay. So current DTA pulled in, I've answered that one. Can the quarterly submissions be made from third-party software? Yep, I've answered that one, and that was, yeah. Do we yet know the cost? So the way that costing is going to work is today you pay us for tax compliance to service your SA customers. In the future, you will either have, let's assume today you've got 100 customers. You will either have 100 SA customers or 100 MTD customers, or maybe a bit of both. You might have 40 customers who are still SA and 60 customers, because of their turnover limit, become MTD. You would pay us for that one price for servicing, let's call it for servicing tax compliance clients. So there's going to be this transition where you're going to have some of your clients at SA on premise, some of your clients at MTD and in the cloud. But what you're not going to be doing is paying us twice for the privilege of servicing a client. I hope that sort of clarifies what pricing is going to be. I'm not categorically going to say prices aren't going to go up, but then equally, we're not going to be charging you twice. Okay, so I don't foresee any pricing changes because of MTD at this stage. Is the quarterly submission picks up information from a TAG Excel? Is the TAG software part of the MTD solution? Yeah, so you'll be able to, part of what we give you, if you like, if you were to subscribe for MTD, is you get a template. As I say, you can design your own templates. As part of it is just that list of named cells that our software knows it needs to pick up. Reference the Excel spreadsheet that were uploaded earlier. Can we see that? Are you offering a spreadsheet that can be sent to clients? So to two parts of that question, let's deal with the second one first, the second bit first. What we will do is give you a template which will collate the data ready for import, but I don't think what we're planning on doing is designing cash sheets that are suitable for your clients. In the past, what I've done is I have generated literally a simple cash sheet which had a date column, a description column, a category column, and an in and out column. And that then was linked to a template, and that then fed through from the client recording a transaction, fed through to what was submitted. In terms of can we share it? We're more than happy to share it. I'm going to put Dorcas on the spot and say, have you got an Excel spreadsheet? You can just pop up on screen so we can very quickly talk through what it looks like.
Yep, just give me 1 second. I'll be able to do that.
Thank you.
In a
Appreciating
minute.
I'm putting you on the spot.
No problem at all.
Whilst you're doing that, I'll just carry on with a couple of the other questions. Will the quarterly returns feed into account production? So yeah, very much not necessarily quarterly, although I can certainly see there is a use case for quarterly if you want to generate quarterly accounts. But our MTD product and our accounts product will communicate with each other. So a workflow might be we collate quarterly data. Those quarterly spreadsheets are used and combined to generate a TB in accounts. We do a set of accounts in the accounts production, and then we import from accounts production in to do that end of period statement. So yes, there will be integrations in there. Do partnerships and the individual partners all have to submit MTD? So partnerships today is 2025. I say today because it might not end up being 2025, but partnerships are going to come in 2025. My understanding is it's the turnover limit of the partnership that determines if one of the nominated partners has to do quarterly submissions on behalf of the partnership. Each partner does not have to do their own partner shares. Okay, so there'll be, same as today for SA, there's a nominated partner who's accountable for signing the return. There will be a nominated partner who's responsible for doing quarterly submissions.
Hopefully you can see my screen, but this is what
all I can see is it says that you've started screen sharing, but I can't see anything, but that might just be me.
Let me stop and reshare. Hopefully that's on screen.
Yep, perfect.
Yep, so this is an example of the template that's available within the product. So you can download it within the application itself. So you've got a view of a separated quarters or combined quarters. It's your preference, but this is essentially what we've created. So all of the blue boxes, all of the tagged fields that we have made compatible with the MTD solution. So you'll just need to input the data in here, and then it will be able to feed into our solution once you upload it. So what we've created for land and property, and this is specifically for non-FHL property, is rudimentary, but like Mark said, it's one of the capabilities we can do is we can allow our customers to utilize their own spreadsheets if they have it, and we'll just add in the tagging so that it's compatible with our solution.
Excellent. And could you just click on one of those? I was going to say, if you just click on one of those blue fields just to give an indication of the names that will appear up in the top left-hand corner.
Yeah.
So up in the top left-hand corner, under File and the back button, you'll see that one is called Client Name. So you can, once you've got that list of Excel named fields, you can design your own templates if you want to. And providing our software gets all of the data points it expects. So, for example, it must have a start date and an end date. You can't have a start date but no end date, just as an example. Then you would effectively, if you wanted to, be able to design your own templates. But the idea behind this is you would design, let's say, a cash sheet suitable for your client, and that would be a sheet that you would link via formula to here. And then this is what our software would look to import. A few more questions. There's another question on final submissions and quarterly. I think I've covered that. So yes, quarterly can be done in another software, and you can just do the final submissions in our software. Will you be able to register clients for MTD via the software? Will this be similar to how HMRC dealt with for VAT, where each client needed to be registered? So my current understanding for bringing an existing SA client over to MTD for when mandation comes in is you'll be able to log into your agent services account and select those clients that are SA and effectively drag and drop them over to MTD. If it's a brand new client, then the way it works is we would do a request to HMRC. So you type in John Smith and a national insurance number. We would do a request to HMRC, and that will come back with a link that you can then share outside of our software. And the client clicks on the link, logs into their digital account, and confirms that they want you to be their accountant. And then that feeds back to the next time we make a call to HMRC. So you can't authorize a client directly within our software. You should be able to move them from your agent services account if it's existing, or there is an external process for a new client. When will the SA client functionality go into the cloud? So this is a question from Fozia. So it's worth calling out at this stage. So in addition to focusing on MTD, we are starting to build out self-assessment in the cloud as well. So we have a very basic SA 100 in our cloud product, and over time that will be built out in terms of capability. When is the right time for you as a firm to decide to move from on-premise to cloud, or not to move at all, is really down to the scope of what you as a firm need in terms of what clients you deal with. We will have a product that will deal with simple self-assessment clients next year. We'll have a product that deals with more complex self-assessment clients into sort of 2024. Now, when's the right time for you as a firm? That really is a firm decision. When I say it's a firm decision, I don't mean that you're going to be completely left to your own devices to make that decision. We will work closely with you to look at your data and to see what type of clients you have and when would be an appropriate time to have that discussion about moving to the cloud, if you want to. When do you think we will be able to use this live, i.e. real data, if, for example, we want to run a client in the pilot? For today and now, we are looking for a firm who wants to take part in the pilot right now. So if you had a suitable client and you wanted to take part in the pilot for this tax year, then we can certainly have that discussion and we can support that. HMRC's current plans are that from April next year, that's when they want to ramp up the pilot submissions, in terms of numbers. So at the moment, it's sort of quite a private beta. It's almost invite only. There's a lot of hand-holding from HMRC to onboard your client. From April, that's when they expect the numbers to ramp up. So that's when we expect to be able to ramp up our offering of the pilot as well. I hope that answers that question. Is the MTD's version functionality as good as the current personal tax version, e.g. CGT, pensions, partnership income, trust income? So short answer is not yet. Longer answer is yes, it will be. So part of that, the fact that a client today is SA and in the future might be MTD, all aspects of that client's tax affairs will be dealt with via MTD. So we have to have the same level of scope and capability that we've got today. So we've not got it yet. Our focus is doing the quarterly submissions, the end of period statements, and that final declaration, and building out that final declaration to build the scope out so that it's got the full breadth of SA. If the client maintains their records in Excel, please can you confirm that there will be no additional cost for the client for MTD, i.e. they will not need to pay for bridging software or bookkeeping software. So if we're talking about you submitting on their behalf, then you can do it through the process that Dorcas has shown you. So they've got their Excel spreadsheet, linked to that template. You can bring that data in and you can click the button and submit it. What we're not focused on at the moment is having a version that's available and client facing that would allow them to self-serve. So if your question is, can you support a client in MTD without them buying additional software? Then the answer is yes. Where a quarterly submission has to be amended, will that be a straightforward process? Yes. I mean, do you want to cover that off actually, Dorcas? Because I know you've sort of demoed that in the past.
Yeah, so it is a pretty straightforward update. I think I can do it really quickly with the self-employment. So all you need to do in the solution is, I am able to bring it up. Yep. Brilliant. So I've just got the self-assessment, self-employment, open. All I'll just need to do is unfinalize this record. I'll just get a notification to tell me if I want to make amendments, which I can. So now this enables me to update this information. Let me see if I've got a file that I can use. So yeah, so we can see the turnover here was 15,000. That's now changed to 10,000. I can happily finalize that now, and then I can resubmit this to HMRC. So in the past it just said submit to HMRC, but now I've been given a notification to ask me to make a resubmission. and that's been successfully sent. So that's how easy it is to make amendments within the solution.
Excellent, thank you. Right, still got a few more questions coming in. Where we have a mix of clients, i.e. self-assessment and MTD clients, will CCH reporting be able to produce reports pulling data from other into one report, e.g. payments on account becoming due? Yes, so that's one area that we are still very much focused on, is whilst you have self-assessment on premise and as clients in MTD, then you're quite right, you effectively have two places where you'll be doing tax work. Now, the important thing from your perspective is that your workflow reporting, there's one central place where you can report on that. So very much, if it comes to, let's call it progress of work, if it comes to reporting on income types, we know that's going to be a challenge that we will be fixing. So our focus at the moment is the workflow reporting. So let's assume today's the 31st of January. I've got some SA clients and some MTD clients. Both are still going to have a 31st of January due date. I need to report quickly in one place. Where's the next thing I need to do? So that's what we're focused on at the moment in terms of what that looks like. But you're quite right. In terms of the broader scope of reporting, yes, we will be able to do that. Did I mention that an individual cannot have a profile both on the cloud and on personal tax, i.e. if an individual is in MTD, they will be dealt with solely via MTD. Does this mean that they will have to maintain two separate client databases? So we will be maintaining those two client databases. So how it will work today is you've got your on-premise database of personal tax clients. When it's appropriate for that client to be an MTD, effectively you click a button and go, this is an MTD client, and we take only the information we need to do MTD into the cloud, and then we synchronize it. So your main record for now is still on premise. The only thing we'll be storing in the cloud is the minimal data that we need for the client, plus the MTD specific data. And where relevant, that MTD specific data will be shared back to on premise so that we can report on it. Would you be able to upload the combined sheet every quarter with the columns filled in as we went along? I think so, yeah, and Dorcas is nodding, so that's a yes. Yeah. Can you run a report from current personal tax to establish all clients who will be affected?
Yes, there is. I can take that. So yeah. We have built a report within Central to allow you to easily identify how who's affected from your client base, and I'm happy to kind of take that offline and share that report with you. I think I've got your name in the comment section.
So anonymous attendee, it looks like mortgage interest on residential property is in the expense category. Is this correct? So in terms of the quarterly reporting, we're not doing any tax adjustments for the quarter. So yes, if we think about a residential property that's got turnover and mortgage interest, that does indeed get declared for the quarter. When we come to do the annual stuff, that's when we would start to do any adjusting. That's my current understanding of mortgage interest. So it is an expense, it gets reported as an expense, and then at the end of the year, you tidy up and do your tax reducer rather than the expense. Will the new digital handshake replace the 64.8? So my understanding, Fozia, is that yes, that new, once we move away from SA and we're in this brave new world of MTD, the current 64.8 process will be replaced by a new digital handshake process. So you've got a government gateway for your old stuff and an agent services account for your new stuff, and that as more services migrate, then more digital handshakes will be appropriate for onboarding a new client. Will the EOPS link direct to the final declaration? Yes, for where it's needed. So the EOPS is at trade or property level, and that sort of finishes off. That's the SA 105 equivalent or the SA 103 equivalent. The final declaration then really is doing all the other stuff. So handing over the bank interest, the employment income and all that sort of stuff, and then HMRC give you back a tax figure, which is everything. So the EOPS and the final declaration all in one piece. I understand you're going to release staff training videos. When do you expect these to be ready for release? That's a very good question. I know we are working on training videos and help topics and things like that. So I'll try and get an approximate date for you, unless you know any more than that, Dorcas.
Yeah, so we'll have all the material available to users. So that includes any e-learning, that includes user manuals and also updates to the user doc and knowledge base to have new MTD collateral. So once we launch our MTD solution, that will be readily available to anybody who wants access to it, who has the application switched on.
Cool, excellent. There's one final question, which hopefully you can, I have a feeling you've touched on this already, but the question is, how is your current reporting for segmentation? Can we see how many clients have UK rental income, FHL property income, so we can plan how many reports per quarter we need to be preparing? So that sort of capability is in personal tax today. It's a question for you, Dorcas.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look. I might take that offline in terms of the detailed functionality, but the capability, as I know, in terms of segmenting your clients to identify who falls within MTD is there.
Okay, great. And I see in the webinar, that's the last of the questions in the webinar chat. I'm just going through, there's a few there. Can we have a copy of the report that helps us identify? So we'll clarify what level of reporting is built into the software already.
Yeah, just to add to that, that seems to be a reoccurring theme here. So what I'll do is I'll, if it hasn't been shared already, I might just drop it in this group chat, or
well, I was
there'll
just
be
going to
further
say, Lee actually has just shared a help topic link to CCH Personal Tax MTD for
Brilliant.
IT reports. So I think that gives, if having read that, if you're on this webinar and you read that and there's still questions, then, you know, feel free to get back in touch with us. Yeah. I think that is everything we've got, unless I've missed anyone. So we are at time. So any last minute questions? Otherwise, we will thank you for your time and say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.